Again, welcome to this webinar. Will be recorded and we will be posting it to our website at chicago.gov/reopening. Again, that's, chicago.gov/business education, and I'll type that into the chat right now, chicago.gov/business education. You will be able to find this webinar there, but we hope to have it up tomorrow. If you have any questions over the course of this webinar, please submit them via the chat function on your presentation. Again, please use the chat function in order to submit your questions. If you have any questions that aren't answered, if you have any follow-up questions, anything like that, please email those questions to us at bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Again, that's bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. You can find that email address. Again, I've just put it into the chat. You can also find that email address on the bottom of every slide over the course of this webinar. So a little bit then, now that we're done with the housekeeping, to get into what we are going to talk about today. Again, today is all about health and fitness centers. We're going to discuss phase 4, which is still titled Gradually Resume. We're going to specifically discuss all the changes that were announced yesterday and will come into effect this Thursday, October 1st. For an overview of all of these changes, please visit chicago.gov/reopening. This is your main location for everything related to the reopening guidelines. Again, chicago.gov/reopening. A little bit about what we're going to talk about today. First, I'm going to give you the latest update on the data and why we are ready for this easing of regulations. Then I'm going to talk about all of the new phase 4 guidelines and provide an overview of specifically the health and fitness center guidelines. I'm going to talk a little bit about enforcement. So before I get into the specifics of the new guidelines, I think it's really important to talk about the data and the case rate and why we are where we are today. And the reason why we are making these changes and the reason why we have made any of the decisions we've made is because of the data. It's because of COVID-19 and its status within the city of Chicago. I'm going to talk a little bit about those data points. Let me clarify, first of all, that I am not from the health department. I'm not the health expert, but I do want to make sure to frame this conversation in the data. As you can see, our case rate is significantly down from its peak around the end of April, beginning of May, but we are still at about 300 new cases per day. Again, we've gone over 1,400 before, so it's nothing like that. But this is significantly higher than it was when we announced phase 4 back at the end of June. But as you can see over the last month or so, our case rate has been decreasing, and that is why we are ready to move to this next stage within phase 4. It's been about 4 weeks, as you can see on this next slide, that our daily average of new cases have been stable or decreasing since August 24th. And our goal is to have that be the case for at least 28 days. There was a dip around Labor Day due to testing on Labor Day, but our case rate has on average been decreasing now, stable or decreasing, for 28 days, which is why we're ready to ease these regulations. Cases are not the only data point that we look at, that the health department looks at when making these decisions. Hospitalizations have been stable or decreasing since August 27th. That's again over 28 days. Deaths during phase 4, as you can see, declined significantly and have been stable or declining since June. We're at about 3 deaths per day, which compared to what we were seeing back in May, is a very good case. Emergency department visits during phase 4. So you can see they're stable or decreasing for COVID-like illnesses dating back to August 30th. You can see in the month of September, very good information there. Test positivity. As we got into August, The cases did get up, case rate, positivity rate did get up above 5%. We're now at 4.3%. We've been stable or decreasing for the last 14 days. The significance of, I got asked the question about the significance of 28 days. Unfortunately, I'm not the health expert, so I'm happy to follow up with the health department, but they've been using both 14 and 28 days as kind of, we use 14 days for like kind of the gestation period of the virus. So for 28 days, meaning we have now 2 of those periods. So they've been using 28 days, and I don't want to say anything wrong because I'm not the health expert. But I do want to kind of provide this guidance before talking about the changes. Hospital capacity during phase 4, as you can see, has been significantly adequate since really dating back to June, dating back to right when we got out of the worst of the virus, which is great news. Hospital, both ICU and non-ICU beds have been significantly below our capacity, as has ventilator use. Seeing a couple questions come in related to the health metrics, specifically rates and transmission in specific locations. I'm happy to follow up with the health department to see if they can provide some guidance there. I wanted to provide this overview, though, before getting into the regulations. Oh, sorry, one last thing. Testing capacity has been way above our goal of 4,500, which is real per day, which is really great news, showing that we can truly understand this virus. So because the data has shown that we have made significant progress, that is why we're able to have new regulations come into effect this Thursday, October 1st at 5 a.m. Again, these new regulations are coming into effect this Thursday. First, increased indoor capacity. This is something across the board. Everything that has been limited to 25% capacity will now be limited to 40% capacity, while maintaining anything that had been limited to a maximum of 50 people is still limited to a maximum of 50 people. So the change is, if it was at 25%, it is now at 40%, while additional maximums still remain in place. That's the first one, and that applies to fitness centers, as we are here today talking about. It also applies to restaurants, movie theaters, museums, performance venues, event venues, personal services, higher education, church services. Any place that has been limited to 25% capacity can now expand to 40% capacity. However, if you have been limited to 50 people in a room or space, you are still limited to that. Doesn't apply specifically to health and fitness centers, but taverns will reopen. Any establishment that serves alcohol without a food license may reopen with indoor seating at 25% capacity or 50 people, whichever is fewer. Bars and restaurants, again, doesn't apply specifically to folks here, but any place that sells alcohol for on-site or off-site consumption may now do so until 1 a.m. and may remain open until 1:30 a.m. Specifically for folks on this call today, maximum group size for health and fitness classes, along with after-school programming, will increase from 10 to 15 people. So we had been limiting group size for health and fitness centers to no more than 10. We can now expand specifically group training, group classes, things like that, to no more than 15 people. Importantly, and I'll get to this in a little bit more detail in just a minute, but you are still limited to 40% capacity and 6 feet of social distancing. So you can increase to 15 people, but if that 15 people makes it so they cannot be 6 feet apart, then you cannot do so. Finally, facials, shaves, other personal services that require the removal of face coverings will now be allowed. So what do I mean by health and fitness centers? And I see a question that just came in related to this. So I mean your typical gyms, exercise fitness centers, strength development centers. Also boutique fitness studios like dance studios, cycling studios, strength and conditioning studios, and yoga studios. really anything that is designed for exercise, or when it comes to fitness studios where you have kind of a potential for training, potential for classes, something like that related to exercise. So question here is, are yoga studios considered health and fitness? Yes, they are. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is provide an overview of all of the health and fitness guidelines that are in place, highlighting specifically the key changes that are in place effective October 1st. So, and I see a couple questions come in. I promise I will answer them over the course of this webinar. So, importantly, everything that is in black on this page is not a change. It's something that has been in effect throughout the last portion of phase 4. The changes are highlighted in red. Okay. So ensure that you have more than 6 feet between individuals and all close choke points, including during one-on-one training. So obviously, if you're doing one-on-one training, you may be coming in closer to your trainer or to the trainee, but you should be doing your best to maintain 6 feet of social distancing. And so one-on-one training is allowed, but you must be doing your best to maintain 6 feet of social distance. That includes 6 feet between equipment, 3 feet if you have impermeable barriers placed between them. So you can only do less than 6 feet between equipment if you have impermeable barriers between them. So indoor capacity is now limited to 40% with the max indoor class size of 15. So that means you limit your indoor capacity to no more than 40%. And this should really be in every separate room or space. So I saw a question about someone that's confused about the 40% capacity. If you can fit 15 people spaced 6 feet apart. So really you need all 3 of those to be the case. You can't go, it's really no more than 40% capacity and no more than 15 people within a class size. So if you can fit 15, but that is actually your full capacity and not 40% capacity, then you still must limit class size to no more than 40%. Indoor fitness classes are limited to no more, again, than 15 individuals, and they must be spaced 6 feet apart. So you need to really check all 3 of those boxes. No more than 40%, no more than 15 within a class, and no more than 15 individuals. Great. Locker rooms and showers can reopen, but other ancillary accommodations must remain closed, such as saunas, steam rooms, or hot tubs. Protective gear should be worn by all employees and customers. Face coverings must be worn over the nose and mouth, including during indoor physical activity. For outdoor activity or classes, face coverings may be removed as long as the individuals are practicing social distancing. You should be ensuring, again, I'm going to just kind of go over quickly the ones that have been in place. You should be ensuring regular sanitizing products. Water fountains should be decommissioned unless they are used to fill up water bottles. This is a new change, but something that hopefully folks have been using anyway. All places of business should provide hand sanitizer for patrons and employees to use upon entry. This is something new that we're making that we're making formal as a part of the guidelines, but it is something that I expect that most people have been doing this. Employees should wash hands before and after every one-on-one training or other close contact with individuals. I had a couple questions about the 50-person limit per room. So as health and fitness centers know, you guys have not been formally limited to no more than 50 people within one space, as have restaurants and bars and other establishments. But we do recommend that in any sort of location in which people are all gathered together, that you do limit that space to no more than 50 people along with that 40% capacity. So if you have any gathering, maybe break rooms, things like that, where you may have a gathering that could potentially have 50 people, it's no more than 40% or no more than 50 people, whichever is fewer. So again, you should be checking both of those boxes. But as I mentioned, in your entire location, health and fitness centers are not limited to that 50-person capacity. You should be, again, nothing on this page. Nothing on this page is new here. But we should be implementing screening measures for employees and customers. That means at minimum, you should be entering establishment. Employees should be self-screening. You should also encourage participants to come to the facility fully dressed in exercise clothes. Many places do more than that, and we encourage them to do more than that, to do temperature checks, things like that. But this is what you should be doing at minimum. I do see a couple questions come in. I'm going to go through the rest of the guidelines before answering those questions. You should be establishing daily cleaning standards for spaces and high-touch items. We're discouraging shared instructor equipment such as microphones, stereos, weights, yoga mats, etc. Encourage staff to bring their own equipment when possible, and any sort of shared equipment should be cleaned and disinfected after all use. You should be posting guidelines and criteria to enter really throughout your establishment, and social distancing guidance in outdoor classes and indoor classes, markings, tape, like that. Here's the only change here. Private pools, indoor pools can now open at 40% capacity, because again, anything that was 25 is now going to 40, and private outdoor pools should still be limited to 50%. PPE is not required while individuals are in the pool. Again, you should be limiting in-person work wherever possible. Obviously, at a fitness center, you need to be there in person, but we do still recommend virtual online training, virtual staff meetings, things like that. I know a lot of folks have done online classes, things like that. We do still encourage that to continue. Minimize client overlap. If you're doing any one-on-one training, you should be doing one client per employee as much as possible without scheduled overlap, just to make sure to minimize social distancing, or to maximize, social distancing, promoting A and B shifts for workers where possible, and limit the overlap of classes. So if a class is leaving, let them leave before the next class comes in to limit space. You should be limiting staff travel, if applicable, across multiple locations. Finally, you should be prepared for the likelihood of an employee contracting COVID-19, following all CDC guidelines before returning to work, including quarantining, have folks that have been in close contact with them quarantine, and cleaning and disinfecting workplace according to the health guidelines. Additionally, if you're aware of 2 or more cases possibly associated with an establishment over a 14-day period, you're encouraged to report those to CDPH, to our health department, in order to help with contact tracing. Okay. I have a couple questions come in that I will now answer related to the guidelines before I talk a little bit about enforcement. I do want to emphasize the only things that are changing are the 40% capacity. So what was 25 is now 40. What was 25% is now 40%. And that classes that were limited to 10 people can now expand to 15 people. Everything else is still the same. Again, the only changes are what was 25% is now 50%, and what was 10 people in class is now 15 people in class. So everything else is the same. Okay. I saw a question, how is that 40% number calculated? That is based on your square footage. So if you have any specific questions about how specifically for your facility to calculate 40%, please send those via email. Please send those questions via email to BACP Outreach, and we will make sure to answer those. Okay. I had a question regarding 24/7 fitness studios. So there's nothing explicitly in the COVID-19 reopening guidelines regarding the hours of operation. So please send us that question via email, and I'll make sure to get you a follow-up. Question about social distancing regarding to one-on-one trainings and physical guidance to clients if both people are masks. If both people are masked, for example, helping someone do a handstand. Now that's something that we do recommend that you should be really in classes maintaining that 6 feet of social distancing. Now we know sometimes in one-on-one training it may be necessary, but in classes we ask, because you're interacting with multiple people, we ask that you very much limit that to 6 feet, 6 feet social distance. Question about closets for clients when they come in. So you can open up, and just let me make sure to have that page mentioned here. You can open up locker rooms, closets, showers, things like that. But other ancillary accommodations should remain closed. So closets, things like that should remain closed. I had a question about how it's confusing to allow more people to congregate, but suggesting people to exercise virtually. I do want to clarify that point. I'm not, gym, health and fitness centers can be open under these guidelines. My comment in saying encouraging exercising virtually is just to as much as possible, if you guys think it is a good plan, to still minimize in-person interactions. That said, the health and fitness centers can be open under these guidelines. So that's more of a just soft recommendation, not a formal suggestion, if that makes sense. Right. The question, do you have a definition for space? What if a room has impermeable barriers creating a divide in the space? So if you do have a location, so to take a step back, we do not have a formal definition of what is considered a space for that 50-person guidelines. But if you do have fully impermeable barriers to create a different space, then you can treat those as different rooms and different classes, things like that. However, they should truly be different spaces. You should not have people be permeating them, going back and forth between them. Question about how tall impermeable barriers need to be. Again, we do not have a formal definition for how tall impermeable barriers need to be. The important thing, though, is that they are truly impermeable. If something is an impermeable barrier that's 3 feet tall, but when you're exercising, you go above that, then it's no longer impermeable. It needs to truly be able to differentiate and be impermeable between people and between fitness equipment. And I had a question, do you know when the face mask indoors during classes will be lifted? I will say that, I'm not speaking from or on behalf formally of the health department, but I know that when the health commissioner and the mayor introduced these new guidelines yesterday, she was very clear that this is something that we hope is on the step towards more and more loosening of restrictions. We are excited to take this next step, but we know that we're still having 300 cases a day, and we will be evaluating this, and we'll continue to evaluate this truly every day. And we hope to increase capacity. We hope to increase class size. But for now, these are the rules that are in place, but I promise you that we are looking at this constantly and evaluating this based on the data consistently. Right. Ask the question to repeat the group exercise room rule. So if you were in a class, if you were in a group class exercise, it is up to 15 people or 40%, whichever is lower. So the max is 15 people, but again, you still need to maintain that 40% capacity. You cannot cram 15 people into a small space. You still need to maintain that 40% capacity. I want to remind everybody that BACP has been and will continue to enforce these guidelines. We've conducted over 2,000 investigations and cited 142 businesses, which, let me be clear, is a very, very good compliance rate. That's a non-compliance rate of only about 6%. And most of these were in response to complaints. So I want to start off by applauding everybody for doing a very, very good job following these rules. I've done trainings now for a number of different businesses, and I want to say you guys have been doing a great job following the rules. But all that is to say, now is not the time to let up. We're getting a lot of questions about when we can go up to 50% capacity, when we can have 50 people in a class, things like that. We are not at that point. But the way we will get to that point is by following these rules and by continuing to be diligent and persistent in following these rules. So I thank all of you. I know this has been a very, very challenging summer. I am hopeful that with these changes, we will see a little bit of we will be able to really truly start our recovery, and hopeful that a month from now, 2 months from now, we can make even more changes. So thank you all very much. And I'll stay on for another minute or two for questions. But if you have any questions that weren't answered, please email BACP outreach@cityofchicago.org. Thank you.